All right, welcome everyone to the fourth episode of the Little Busters Book Club, presented by the Clan Ad Discord. As always, I am your host, TrueVoltage. Joining with me for yet another episode is Agility, aka Nate. So Nate, how's it going? Give a little introduction again, as you always do, and then we'll get into some of our initial thoughts of these spectacular routes.
All right. Well, it's definitely good to be doing this again. It was at this point I've completed through refrain, having completed everything else, so I'll refrain from giving any spoilers beyond the
Ah,
Haruka route. But
good
yeah,
pun. All right.
ah, um, that was totally unintentional and all that. Yeah. Uh, but yeah, it's definitely been a great ride, and the two routes that we're going to be talking about today were certainly some very interesting ones, and certainly one of them is up there as one of my favorites so far.
Okay. So, going into both of the routes, kind of what were your initial thoughts of about Kurugaya and Haruka?
Kurugaya, I just kind of thought was a bit of an interesting character. Obviously, certainly a unique one. Definitely interested me, but I really had no idea what to make of her. And going through her route, definitely did offer that additional insight into just the type of person she is. And by the end of it, I was a fan, and it left me really wanting more by the end of that route. And I guess we can sort of go into exactly why that is,
Hmm.
at the end. And Haruka herself, um, I initially went in kind of thinking she was, a fun, bubbly character, but didn't really have a huge attachment to her. But by the end of her route, she became one of my favorites. Uh, and I guess sort of minor spoilers reminded me a little bit of how I felt about Yui in Angel Beats, where originally it was sort of that super Genki character,
Hmm.
very active and hyper, but I was kind of, a little on the fence on. And by the time we got all of that backstory, uh, instantly became one of my favorites.
Hmm. Okay. Um, so I guess like for me going into it, Kurugaya, having seen the anime, uh, Kurugaya's route like was felt like extremely short, and I guess like Haruka's kind of did as well. Or like kind of reflecting back. So I was really wanting more Kurugaya, which obviously this route was still the shortest in the VN, but I definitely felt like it definitely expanded on some things. It gave a little bit more extra detail and stuff like that that I really appreciated. Um, and kind of spin off on that, have you gone back now that you've finished Refrain? I guess like not talking about exactly what happened, but I'm just curious. Have you actually gone back and played her route again? Because there's actually a new scene that appears after you've beaten Refrain, which will kind of gives like not necessarily a true ending because I still feel like the route ended kind of true, but it does give you like an extra ending now that you've beaten Refrain. So,
I, I'm going to have to do that. I haven't done that yet, but by the end of Refrain, and I guess, we'll have to wait for that particular podcast to talk about that. But sort of by the end of her route, I had some. Of my own little theories, and it left me wanting more,
mhm.
just because, it definitely was the shortest route, and there was, almost like a little bit left to be desired, and just I wanted that little bit of extra closure. And if there is something, else to be found in her route again post refrain, then I'm definitely going to have to go back and do that, just because I'm really curious about that.
Mhm. Yeah, and for Haruka, like I guess like when I was first introduced to her character watching the show, I kind of felt like pretty much the same things about her being a uh, kind of more of what would I say? Kind of a rule breaker, I guess. Kind of like one that's like not gonna put up with anything. Kind of a does what she wants and kind of doesn't care if she gets in trouble. and then kind of like a kind of the prankster kind of character. Uh, the comparison to Yui was pretty nice from Angel Beats because they share some pretty similar personalities. Um, but definitely going into the VN, I definitely was definitely wanting a lot more out of her route because it was like super short in my opinion. Um, in the anime. So I
Hmm.
was after having completed it, Haruka like has like jumped up on my list because the VN did uh, a way better job on her route. I feel like out of all the routes so far, her route did not get enough attention in the show, and they definitely expanded and gave a lot more detail on not only like her backstory and things, but just gave some like little, just more minor like cutesy details on things with the music, with them sitting in the corner listening to the music and stuff, which we'll get into, um, and some other things, like
Oh my goodness, that
with the
instrumental
parents
version
and
of
stuff.
Far Away is something special.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Um, so we'll I guess we'll kind of jump right into Kurugaya now. Um, So Kurugaya, Yuiko is kind of the kind of portrayed as like the older sister. She's kind of the self-reliant individual. Um, she's like straight up the genius um, in the group. Like they say that she's like placed in the top 10 in the national mock exams. She's also an extreme tease, which I think like kind of adds a new
That's
dynamic with
underselling
the group.
it.
Yeah, and underselling, yes, but to not detail exactly how intense she can get with some of her antics. But she also like we learn that she cares very much about the little busters and her friends and stuff, and going into it, um, you know, we know that you can't necessarily be completely like an emotionless person, but like kind of how she acts and portrays you, you think that she maybe not like not that she doesn't have emotions, but she suppresses them like heavily. But we learn that it's not necessarily the case. We learn that she's kind of someone that's just kind of just done her own thing, and she's not like really had the interaction and had the shell broken to where she's really not maybe not even needed uh, to express these emotions. Um, and Ricky and the other little busters kind of help break it down a little. Um, so with that said, um, let's get into her route. Let me kind of slow this down a little bit because it looks like these pictures are going kind of fast. Um, so Kurugaya does kind of her route kind of doesn't begin until her and Ricky kind of interact in the broadcasting room for the first time. We learn that Kurugaya spends pretty much like her lunch hour a lot of times, or kind of evening esque time doing these musical broadcasts um, during these time periods. Um, and I guess it kind of begins like 22nd of May ish. Um, and then kind of after that, we learn that the math teacher like completely despises her basically because like she straight up just uh, kind of just like not necessarily like went off on him, but like kind of showed off. I guess would be a
I was gonna say
good
she
way to
could pretty much teach that class instead of
yeah,
him, and probably be.
exactly. And that kind of reminds me of one of my high school math teachers that pretty much um, pretty much like basically could have just like watched a brick wall and probably learned more math. Um, so we kind of learned then that Kuragaya is kind of going through this some pretty rough shit. We learned that because of like her genius and kind of I guess just the way that she's kind of got this snuck up attitude, I guess, and towards everyone that's not a little buster, she's kind of she's been getting bullied, and I think that's an interesting topic. There's not really like many topics. There's not really like many like bullying cases in key VNs. So it's interesting that Kurugaya is the one that's actually getting bullied, even though like in her case, I mean, she obviously is probably perfectly fine. She's probably one of the only people that like it's just kind of whatever about it. Like it wouldn't probably affect her.
I was
Um,
say she can be bullied, but I mean, she can take it, and if she really wanted to, she could obviously dish it right back out. But
yeah.
she, definitely a better person than that.
So yeah, we learned that there's these thumbtacks that are getting put in her locker, and I guess like kind of Ricky kind of begins to step in, and then he himself gets found, uh, kind of with his tail behind his legs, with him being the new victim. Um, and so like it ends up getting as the days progress, the bullying gets worse. There's like not only thumbtacks but like chewing gum and garbage in shoes, and um, one of the interesting things is we learn that Suganami is one of the perpetrators. Um, she doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Ricky's bullying, because that would be kind of crazy. But um, she is part of the group against Kurigaya. Um, and so, like, when Ricky finally confronts her, she's like freaking clueless about it. But then Takamiya and Katsuzawa show up, and they all start arguing, and um, that's when they actually kind of back Ricky into a corner with their threats and everything, and then all of a sudden here comes like this broadcast, and Kurigaya kind of comes out of nowhere with this broadcast and kind of just lays it on them with the fact that she had been recording their conversations at the lockers, and plays it back and kind of you have been red-handed kind of deal. Um, and I think that was pretty smart of her. Um, and so then we learned then that the math teacher had kind of bribed them to 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 threaten and do these kind of bullying attempts against Kurigaya to get back at her. And of course, like it ended up getting like Ricky involved, and um, I thought it was kind of sad that Ricky kind of had to tell like Masato and Kingo and Kyosuke, like don't get involved. That because they didn't want them to get involved, and then uh, Kurigaya feel like the Little Busters and her have to kind of split in order to stop this kind of bullying. Uh, and we kind of learned that Kurigaya would have been perfectly fine, and I think things would have like probably been over in a one fell sweep if Ricky would have just told him to begin with. Um, but I guess what were your thoughts kind of during all of this bullying, and kind of where'd you think it was going to go and stuff?
Um, I mean, to be honest, I kind of, and as to the exact method in which it happened, that I wasn't sure of, but the fact that it ultimately did come down to Kurugaiwa basically going, by the way, I've known that this has been going on, cut the shit. That much I sort of anticipated as being happening.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious as to how that would come to be. But certainly the bullying attempts and the, everything they certainly did do, it was like, wow, that's like a little much, for what I would expect them to do. And then particularly that the math teacher was involved, and it's like, wow, that's a really shitty thing to do. So I
Mm-hmm.
spent a good portion of that part of the route really just like silently raging, just hoping, okay, when are they gonna get their just desserts? And
Yeah, and then
you know,
we get this famous scene, which I've stopped now that we finally kind of caught up. Uh, she just straight up kicks the shit out of the door, and I think like that whole scene like played out perfectly with her just like finally like not necessarily like I mean she's obviously shown emotion in the past, but like really expressing it to this extent and kind of like actually losing her cool for once. She plays it off like she's acting it out, and like it's some sort of act to get them to kind of stop messing with them. But we know that she's obviously like actually pissed off, and then she blames Masato, which I think was freaking hilarious. Like Masato comes out of nowhere and getting ready to help them try and figure out what to do about the door. She just straight up uh, blames him in front of the
Uh,
teachers,
that
and
yeah, that made me go from angry to just, you know, at that point I was just laughing. I absolutely love that.
um, so that was really good. And then yeah, she screams this like "you worthless pieces of scum," and the I think the anime does it even better justice. Like that scene, like literally sends chills when you watch it. Like it is like insane. I really enjoyed
Going
that.
from going so from all cool and collected, and it's like someone that has a control over their emotions to someone that's suddenly like, oh shit, shit just got real. This is like, okay, now we can see what she is truly capable of. Not gonna fuck with her now.
So kind of after that goes down, like Ricky and Kuro kind of run away. And that's when kind of I guess like Ricky kind of first notices that there's maybe something else going on uh, with his feelings and stuff. Because like he kind of admits that he enjoyed having his hand pulled by Kurugaya. And then they that's when he kind of has another episode and passes out and wakes up, and Kurugaya had basically like carried him all the way back to the dorms, and that's when like he's pretty much forced to admit that he likes her to Kyosuke and all the others. And I thought that was pretty good. And so after that, they decide to go. I guess like kind of a date on to go to the cafe. Uh, and they share the umbrella, and those are some like really good scenes between them because we kind of learn of this childlike nature that Kuro kind of has with her wanting to like splash in the puddles and kind of not care at all. Um, and then of course like Ricky catches the code, and um, Kuro like sneaks in and checks up on him. Um, so hopefully some of these scenes will catch up. And right now it's
Yeah,
kind of just going through the making Ricky confess. And then like, oh yeah, I forgot they all the others had this like scary like reminiscence of like the bad encounters that the other guys have had with her, and like how scary she can be.
oh my god, I'd loved this entire little section where they're sort of trying to get Ricky to actually pair up with her, but at the same time, all of them are like, I ain't touching that with a 10-foot pole,
Yeah.
but good luck.
Oh yeah, I
Let's
need
see
to.
what we can do.
I forgot to. I forgot to go back. I was gonna go back and play through all the other, because they kind of do this like the Love Hunters or whatever mission, and they kind of all get together and kind of with the other girls. They kind of each interact with them to do like a test of like how Ricky should approach things, and the interactions with them are freaking hilarious. Between like, because I think like I had like Masato and Kamari, and that scene was hilarious. And then like Kyosuke and Mio, I think, and Kyosuke like tripped over a mine or something, and it like blew up and everything. And it was those scenes were freaking hilarious. Um, I really need to go back and play through the rest of them, like with the different combinations or whatever.
Yeah, I might have to do the same since yeah, that entire section was just like, I don't know what's going on, but this is freaking hilarious.
And like Kurigaya even is like, "What are you doing?" like like she even like notices it, and he kind of has to like play it off as if it's nothing really going on.
Oh, just little busters things. Just
This
the
was one of
usual.
my favorite quotes that's coming up. Kyosuke's like, "You're not an ordinary hero. You're a legendary hero."
This okay, yeah, this part made me absolutely just burst out laughing. Riki doing the impossible.
And yeah, so we finally get some of the Umbrella uh, CGs coming up. Like, these were probably some of my favorites. And then they had the coffee or whatever, which I thought was really nice.
I have to say, every time Little Busters has had some scene in a cafe, it's made me just want to pause, run down the road to a cafe, and grab myself a latte or something.
Oh yeah. And then so we've got the code scene where like she kind of pops up. Ricky wakes up and she kind of pops up out of nowhere. Like, here you go. I've been taking care of you, and I basically don't even have a coat on right now. I thought that scene was really good. And then of course she's like consistently teasing him during all of this. Um, so hopefully we should be getting into my favorite scene in the entire VN so far, uh, which is where they we find out the mission changes not from the level of hunters. It actually changes to the lolly hunters,
Oh my god,
and
poor
that's
Kyosuke.
and
What he
that's when
brought
like
himself.
and that's when like Kyosuke just completely gets like destroyed by everybody. Uh, I mean, he basically becomes this like lolicon suspect, and then it just kind of goes through this whole ordeal of like interactions and everything. And like Kyosuke starts like getting with the others, like with Kingo being into Shrine Maidens and Masato being into oh, what was it? Dang it, it actually just went by too. Um, Maids, I think. And when you
Can't
write
blame you there.
21 really fast, doesn't it sort of look like law? like, that, like that was just freaking great. Like I
It's
just
like
loved all of
Kyosuke.
that.
It's like Kyosuke, you're not helping yourself right now.
Yeah. And oh man, I'm still waiting on the best scene. Uh, when he
The one
says
where Rin enters the room.
yes. He says, "I'll keep doing lolly hunters by myself," says Kyosuke as Ren walks in and their eyes meet. And it's like truly, and here it comes, and it's truly the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like I legit died for like 5 minutes. Like I just like stayed up and just laughed.
I
Uh,
definitely had to pause for a second just because I could not stop laughing from that.
and then it kind of goes on and like even during like lunch and stuff the next day, like Ren's like, I'm not talking to you. And so anyway, so after those kind of antics go, they decide to finally have these fireworks shoot off these hanabi, and they try and get Kurugaya and Ricky in a classroom to be able to watch it, and kind of goes through just kind of setting up the fireworks scene, and they get to finally watch it go off, and it's a really good moment between them. Um, but of course, like teacher comes and Ricky's not able to confess. Like, of course that happens during like the perfect moment uh,
Every time.
every time. Um, and so he ends up like finding her at the broadcast room, uh, and uh, we notice that it's raining outside or whatever. Um, and that's when he pretty much forces a confession, and because she kind of like plays it off and acts like it doesn't exist. Uh, so hopefully we should be getting that coming up soon. Oh man! But so what did you think of the fireworks and the effort that they put in to make it work?
I mean, classic Little Busters. scenario where they just do this seemingly ridiculous thing, which by all accounts, launching a firework in on school property is a pretty ridiculous thing, but it was absolutely a lovely event. And particularly after having spent that previous portion laughing my ass off, this was just a very touching moment that was, sort of a little bit of a contrast to that, but at the same time was just it worked very well for sort of the dynamic between the two and just sort of what the Little Busters really mean to both Riki, Kurugaya, and just the dynamic between all of them.
Hmm. So, so Ricky confesses, and that's when Kurugaya kind of gives this kind of almost like sad, somber story of the flowers, and her picking them up and them basically withering away, and uh, basically like Ricky like tells is told to forget to forget about asking her, and that she can't return anyone's feelings, which we know is not the case, but. Uh, but Ricky's like, no, I'm not gonna let that stand. So I'm definitely going to confess. And after making the right route choice, he shows up
That
and
that blush was that made me smile so damn
oh
much.
yeah. So and just like the blushing, and once they start kind of going out, we find out even more that she really does have emotions, and um, she can really shine when she needs to. Um, so and one of the things that I, for some reason, didn't take a picture of, she actually we find out an interesting little tidbit trivia that I don't even know if it was even told in the anime, that when during kind of the weekly loop or whatever, she tells Ricky that she was called Lisbeth abroad. Um, so she actually has another name, uh, Lisbeth. Um, and then and they kind of keep this repetition of from then on, and then it starts snowing, and uh, Ricky finally like kind of figures out that there's like a Groundhog Day scenario going on, um, and it's kind of comes to fruition when he notices that she's had this memo pad, where she's kind of begun to list that the things that she needs to remember to kind of keep it going. That they're going out. So their first date was at the cafe, and um, to bake cookies every time, because she had made cookies the first time or whatever. They had kind of met after the confession and everything, um, and then it kind of goes like um, it kind of goes kind of even like, I guess, like even more south, um, because we learn that she's kind of like forced this kind of time to stand still so that she could kind of get her wish granted of uh, being able to be with Ricky, and has kind of uh, prevented things from going back on track. Um, and so she's kind of held him at um, kind of against the world's will, so to speak. And we she says her last kind of famous line of, "I wonder if my voice will reach them," which obviously is important for a refrain, um, but it kind of gives like this kind of somber esque like uh, telling that there's something there's something kind of going on, and there's something more to it, um, as to why like she can't get her true happiness or whatever. Also, the air cleaning, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10 scene. Terrible for your health. I don't recommend. Do not clean your ears with Q-tips, people. But that scene was cute as fuck. But oh, once the scene kind of catches up, um, we'll kind of discuss our
That
opinions on
was
the route as a whole.
yeah, that that ear cleaning scene was definitely sort of a nice, touching, intimate one between the two. Um, really showcasing just how close they were, but how far apart they will ultimately wind up being. So it was definitely a very somber, ending to that route. Whereas many of the others that we've seen so far had their own happy ending. This was sort of like there's, it just sort of wasn't ending. Um,
Yeah,
and
it
as
was an ending, but yet it kind of feels like there was still stuff left off. But um,
the
it
unfinished business
yeah,
almost.
and which of course we learn why. But um, it's I think kind of imperative like that. This is the one route where things kind of went a little different because it's not because she actually is the one that kind of intervened and kind of forced her own happiness here. Like she kind of uh, kept things lingering long enough. Um, and then so this kind of shows of I wonder when it all started. So I decided to add my own lines to the story, kind of showcasing where she wanted to spend time with Ricky and uh, get her own scene basically. Um, but I think the route for a whole as a whole was really good. I think I didn't feel like the route necessarily gave me any more than I didn't already know from the show. Um, I do think that I think there were some additional, obviously, details with kind of cool tidbits like the Elizabeth thing. Um, I thought that was really cool that we kind of learned an English name for her. Um,
Yeah, that I mean, the route itself, I definitely enjoyed sort of the ride to it, but that ending, I definitely felt like there was a little bit to be desired, and there was that just it, there was that completion that you just want to see her be happy,
hmm
because she definitely deserves that, but she just wasn't able to get that. So you know, still definitely rooting for her. So I'll have to go back and replay her route now that I've played the refrain, but we'll see when I can get to that again.
hmm Yeah, I think that the last scene will kind of give you some maybe not enough closure, but will give you a little bit. Um, and then yeah, so finally we reached the really nice CG with the piano playing, and I wonder if my voice will reach them. And with that, that will end our Kurugaya discussion, and so we will move on to probably your second favorite, and probably now my second favorite uh, after Ren. Um, get into some Haruka Sagasa. Um, so again, like Haruka is kind of this, as described here, she's this like constantly late, kind of prankster, kind of um, does what she wants, is the rule breaker. Um, she's really kind of the sore thumb in the group. Like even like Kingo is kind of like every time she shows up, he's like, "This freaking chick, here she comes, dang it!" But I
It's
mean,
like, oh, damn it.
yeah, but he doesn't say anything, but he's definitely got. You can tell that he's definitely least interested in Haruka. Um, but of course, there's a reason Haruka is the way she is, and so let's get into her out. Um, so the first kind of incident is she's gets in trouble with the vending machine, and Ricky kind of stops in and saves her. Um, she's just trying to buy some vending machine that some drinks, and um, she got like four or something, and they blamed her for kicking the machines, and she says that she didn't do anything, and they say different, and Ricky's like, "Look, there ain't even a dent on the damn thing." Um, And so, we kind of learn that she's consistently targeted by the disciplinary committee. Um, and we kind of learn why that, and why Haruka is like such so against it, with her sister, uh, Kanata, Futaki, uh, being the head prefect or whatever. Um, but some cool little tidbits, I guess, um, when that kind of foreshadowed some things that I kind of picked up on, kind of going back through it. Uh, Seeing as I already kind of knew what was going on and how it ended up. Some of the cool foreshadowing things. When she's like showcasing the breaking the eggs and the yolk and everything. Um, there's like a scene where she's got it talks about how there being like two twin yolks in the udon bowl. And I thought that was like a really nice like foreshadowing.
That's one of those subtle things that I feel like you definitely wouldn't know or even remember until you've gone far enough through
Oh
the
yeah.
route or have completed it, and it's like, oh man, that's some clever foreshadowing that I definitely did not even pick up.
And so we kind of learn. She talks about she doesn't like her last name. During one of the baseball practices, she's like, "Don't call me, call me Haruchin uh, or Haruka or whatever." She doesn't like the Saigusa part, and um, she's constantly trying to get away from anything to do with it. And so some of the other scenes with her and Ricky, the first kind of, I guess, like even before the vending machine, is the famous marble rolling scene where they're just she's just escaping for something random and just throws marbles on the floor, and that's kind of when Ricky meets Kanata, kind of, I guess, for like the second time. Uh, the first being with Kud. Um, so I thought that was pretty interesting. Um, but I guess what were your thoughts on Kanata when you first met her? What was your kind of impression on her as a character?
Um, I mean, probably the same as many others when you first meet her and don't know, her backstory. Where it's just like, oh, come on, just, get that stick out of your ass. You are just really being unfair to everyone. Particularly to Haruka, she really does not deserve the crap that she's getting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yet, you know, this just keeps coming back and coming back. And then we just see it get worse and worse as time goes on. Um, and then, once we get towards the end, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But um, just for a good portion of that route, I've just found myself going, I cannot stand this character. I really hope we reach a point that, I can, and that we, see why she is the way she is, and maybe she just is the way she is because of, you know, that's just how she is. And I was kind of hoping that wasn't the case, and thankfully it wasn't. But as someone that hadn't seen the anime and thus was going into this blind, uh, there was a good portion of that route where it's just I could not stand her. And honestly, the fact, they definitely made it that way. They purposely made it that way. She obviously acted that way to get that type of, to have people feel that way towards her. So that's the visual novel definitely did a good job at really playing with our emotions for toward her.
Yeah. So, I definitely feel like the VN definitely expounded on some things. Um, Haruka wants Ricky to go to her house on one of the nights, or one of the evenings or whatever, and they get there and things are going pretty nice, and then all of a sudden her parents come home, and she's like, we finally get to see like this interesting side of her, um, and we kind of learn that she kind of despises the parents she's living with, and even though they seem like pretty, friendly folks, and they seem nice and everything, she can't stand it. Uh, but we learn that she's been coming home from the dorms, um, in order to go home, uh, which and I guess like the anime kind of, it doesn't even have those scenes at all with in fact, like she's in the dorm and she has like another roommate, in fact, and so like she like never goes home, so like they straight up cut that out of the show. So I think like getting those scenes was almost like kind of required, uh to like really understand the situation, and get her like a better feel of what she was going through, uh, as a character. um I'm trying to think. And then so after that, um she actually doesn't even like show up to class, um and like Ricky uh kind of gets worried for once, about the situation, um because she used to be like a chronic skipper, which was fine or whatever, but Ricky's actually finally like kind of concerned, and ends up getting confronted by Kanata, and Kanata's like, you need to stay away from and not like involve yourself anymore with Haruka. Um, but Ricky's like, nah, fam, she mine, and that's when
The
he
real
finally,
bro here.
and then he finds her in a corner of her classroom, listening to music, and they kind of just like actually like share this like really cool moment of listening to some good instrumentals, um, and it's actually a really touching scene, um, and we finally get to see those like famous socks for the first time in that CG, and it was really nice. Um, I'm like really hoping like the scenes kind of catch up. I took so many screenshots during this route, like it was insane. I
I don't blame you. I mean, it was a fairly lengthy route, but every moment of it was just fantastic. I mean, there's sort of a reason it's really, you know, up there with Rinzru as, being my favorite, just for how well it was done
Oh
and
yeah,
just what impact it had.
yeah. So we kind of learned that, I guess I'll just kind of skip to the, um there's like a lot of like provoking going on between her sister and her, and one of the biggest one of the biggest kind of scenes that kind of take place after that, you know Haruka's part of the maintenance committee, even though it technically doesn't exist, um and she goes and tries to help repair a bench that means a lot to her, with Ricky, and they finally they fix it. It's all nice and everything, and then freaking Kanata comes and just fucking says, "I don't give a damn." Just destroys it. And I thought that was like that was and that's one of the kind of the first times that like Haruka like is like legit about to like fight Kanata, but then like Ricky ends up being the one that's about to swing on this chick, because like Haruka's like freaking crying and everything, and like Ricky's like freaking ticked off at this like snobby, this snobby prefect that's just constantly like degrading Haruka. Um,
Dude's gonna white knight, and honestly, it's not entirely undeserved. Since yeah, that entire scene was just like, holy shit, this just it was getting real, but shit just hit the fan.
oh yeah, and then And then like after like kind of after that scene, things like went from still some like some kind of humor and things. It kind of just like went straight right into the route of like straight seriousness and going into entirely into her backstory and kind of the whole backstory of both of them. And that's when the whole like classroom and the blackboard incident of people writing stuff on it um, and then Ricky finally walks in one time to one of the blackboards and sees murder written on the blackboard, and that's when he kind of finds out about all the flyers that are going around uh, that talks about and where when we first learn about Haruka's dad, real dad, well, potential real dad, I guess. The supposed dad. That's what I guess I should say. Um, and how this person was like arrested and put in jail for a long time for this, basically assaulting uh, who would, I guess now would be like both of their parents, um, Kanata's and hers. And that's when we kind of learn. That's when we kind of learn about the whole backstory. Um, of the whole Saigusa tradition of two husbands marrying one wife, and we learn of the crazy conception of them both. Two fathers, one, uh, two different fathers for both of them, and that's when it kind of just hit the fan of one's um, Futaki and one's a Saigusa, and um, and
I
then
mean, it's
he kind of shames the whole family by doing what he did, uh, and that's when it kind of they had to split them up, and they uh, did the whole terrible thing of like testing each other, testing Kanata uh, and Haruka.
if
Uh,
you think your family life is bad, look at these two.
yeah, yeah, and we as we learn more and more on how they're both being raised up. They're both kind of being tested to see which one's going to be the heir of the Saigusa family, and Kanata obviously like kind of wins out, and Haruka becomes like this pretty much like beaten, useless tool that's kind of just like thrown away to the side, uh, and that kind of begins to explain everything because now like instead of like Haruka trying to like better herself or anything, she's kind of her entire mentality is to kind of just get back at Kanata, um, and just kind of get back at her, and that's why we learn that she's consistently like doing everything she can at school to like get her in trouble with her aunt and uncle, and well, we find out that she's unfortunately she's not the only one that's getting getting some harsh treatment. We learn that Kanata herself is being incredibly, uh, ridiculed and everything because there's
Right.
still a slight chance that she may be the Saigusa, that she may be Sho's
The
daughter, and
right. The moment she slips up is the moment that, whatever, I guess I don't really want to say benefit, but, whatever preferent, special treatment that she's been receiving compared to Haruka, that could all crumble. And she's already being abused enough. She's already
hmm
having her own struggles. And it's like, how much worse can it possibly get? So seeing that, it was like, okay, well, now things are starting to come together. Now, whatever misplaced, whatever feelings we had towards it before, now I understand, because before I did have that feeling that there was something more. What was it? And then we realized, okay, Haruka isn't the only one that's actually suffering. She just kind of got uh, the short end of the stick from the family. But as Kanata mentioned, if she were to roll up her sleeves or anything, you would see welts from belts, which I guess was the Sayusa family. Uh, I don't know what to call it, but family specialty.
hmm
nothing like discipline with a belt.
So I guess like kind of going through like and going into the backstory. Um, what did you think about what did you think the outcome would be between the two characters? Did you think that they would reconcile somehow in the end, or did you think that Haruka would find out like who was the real dad and uh, kind of like rat it out, or
I guess in from having played Clan Ad and having seen, other key works as well as having played some of the previous routes, I suspected that there would be some reconciliation as to how that would come about, um, just what the lessons that would come of it. A lot of that I really didn't start fully piecing together until closer to the end, but I did suspect that there would be that reconciliation. It was just a matter of what how is that going to come to be?
um, I guess like kind of while I'm waiting on things to catch up, um, did you uh did you go through either the bad routes or both of them? Uh,
I have not.
okay. Well, unfortunately, if you beat the route, you actually are not able to get the second bad route. It like permanently locks. But the I guess you can still kind of go through the first one, but basically kind of a similar thing that happens with Kiro and Rel from Clanad. Kind of similar situation happens where uh, Kanata kind of fakes being Haruka and tries to get Rick tries to get like uh, Ricky to kind of stop you know stop caring and kind of just kind of forgetting about Haruka kind of deal um, and then like kind of spoils it on him that oh, I'm Kanata, and reveals, and then Haruka kind of like legitimately like loses it basically mentally. It's actually a really good bad scene that you need to kind of go through. It's pretty good. It's really freaking tragic. Um,
I may have to go through that. Although I don't know, with a key tragedy, that can be kind of rough to go through sometimes.
yeah, it's not too bad, but it I think it was a pretty good scene for Kanata to see what would have happened if we wouldn't have gone the right way, and how like she kind of just like straight up um, just like continues to try and get Haruka to kind of give up on Ricky and stuff. Um, but so so Ricky and Haruka kind of decide to investigate and try and figure out who the real dad is. Who's the real Saigusa of the two, and we learn that Sho is like when they finally run into him, that he's kind of like this drunk that's like super like out of it, like he's kind of doesn't want to be involved with anyone or anything, and um, like straight up will not talk to either of them. He's talked to Kanata, obviously, like we find out that they've obviously talked a little, um, but he's literally waiting on them to kind of, they've got to both be there, we learn, um, which because like in the anime the whole like visiting the parents and the parents telling Haruka that Sho will tell them if they both go there together wanting the answer. uh, the anime actually kind of plays that out differently because of how the parents aren't as involved uh, at all, really, in the show.
Which is
So
kind of
it's
that's kind of amusing to me, given how involved they actually are in
yeah,
the
and
route
that's
in
yeah,
general.
exactly, and that's why like I think like out of all the routes, like this was the one route that I don't think the anime did enough justice for. Um, and so it'll definitely be interesting for, like, to see how you react to it when when we go back and rewatch it, and you watch it for the first time, to see how her route plays out, because it's interesting to see like how much they actually cut out, because I think like they literally sliced and diced. Like it's still there, like you still get some of the raw emotion and stuff, but like they definitely like left out a lot of the build up on like all of the prefects and all of their like constant haggling of her, and then like the build up with the flyers and the blackboards, and then all the intro from the parents, and like a lot of the just interactions between her and Kanata, like were just straight up cut out, and it's really sad to see. But obviously they had to cut out something in order to make the time fit.
I was
It's
gonna
just sad it
say
was her route.
when it comes to like visual novel anime adaptations, you've got to you've got to cut corners somewhere to
Yeah.
make it all fit together. So it is just the consequence of that. Although I haven't actually seen it yet. I actually have downloaded it, so I've got it ready to go.
And so I guess like to kind of wrap up Haruka's, uh, they finally Ricky kind of confronts Kanata about the whole egg allergy, because the one thing that Haruka's always been better technically, or thinks, than Kanata is the whole making things out of eggs. And we learned that Kanata could make everything just as much out of eggs, that she didn't have this allergy, but she kind of wanted Haruka to have something, and it was the one thing that like um, it was the one thing that she got beat at, and that Kanata got beat at, and which we learned that her parents like went off on her over it, and but they kind of finally like admit that um, Kanata kind of like finally admits that she's had it rough too, um, and they finally have their touching moment of um, that she just wanted a sister, basically, that she um,
Right. They really did just they never really wanted to be separated, but their family really got in between and
mhm.
really screwed them both over. So now,
Yeah, that
uh,
it wasn't either of their fault. It was just the situation at large, and um, we even learned that like even like their parents and show like they were trying to get out away from the family, which you can't blame them, and they had this elaborate plan, but it didn't go right, and things it just kind of happened the way it happened, and they no one foresaw that like how Haruka would be treated, and the parents would have this make him do this contest and stuff. Uh, but then they finally the parents tell him to go and see show together, and they did, and they uh, they finally Haruka was like perfectly fine not knowing at this point, which I think was kind of really mature on her, that she no longer cared like who was the actual Saigusa, that they had each other now, and so they didn't need anyone else. They didn't need to know that info anymore. And then they had the really nice photograph and all of that.
interesting family dynamics, but absolutely, definitely a loving family, and that's I definitely loved the ending of that route. Just the entire ride up through it. It's not a story I haven't seen in some similar fashion before, though certainly the family dynamics and how they were related is you know that's sort of new, but the I mean the way they presented it, the way they told it, it was just fantastically done. And by the end, I was uh, just really moved by that, and that's I think we can both sort of agree that the route itself has really made Haruka, sort of a favorite, and uh, definitely has one of the stronger routes in the game.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd argue that in terms of like going from kind of 180 on thinking of thoughts on character, Haruka's definitely like uh, kind of go from like kind of thinking she's kind of this annoying character that's just kind of there for kind of comedy and kind of just there to be the prankster and kind of bring some humor along, but she's turned into this like really lovable character that you understand exactly why she did what she did and what she was trying to accomplish and you kind of you can kind of respect that you respect her a lot more now and
Oh
I think that's like something a lot of stories don't do right. You don't necessarily like tell a story and your entire view changes on a character. Uh, that it can one dynamic can kind of just go from one end to the other. But in Haruka's case, it did. Uh, you kind of finish ending like you end it feeling like she's a brand new character, and she kind of is. When it ends, she is a new character. She's matured and she's let bygones be got bygones. Because she knows that it's not her sister's fault. It's not her fault that it's just kind of the societal uh, pressure that's been just unfortunately been placed upon them and
yeah, I mean they both got screwed over. In the end, it's neither of their fault. It's not their parents' fault. We can definitely, you could certainly put blame towards uh, the family traditions and all of that. But at the end
mm-hmm,
of the day, that's not going to allow anyone to move on. And that was really, the message at the end of it. And I thought it was definitely a great message and one that people could certainly afford to, remind themselves of.
mm-hmm. And this is right now the Saints are actually going through the bad ends right now. Uh, so don't look if you cared about that, but um,
I'm not super super concerned, but
well, yeah. Um, but I guess like so. Uh, what were your overall thoughts now looking back on Haruka's route? Uh, what was your favorite scene? Um, what would you say?
I think my favorite one was really the one where Kanata sort of broke down and really was just like, I really just want my sister. This wasn't something that I wanted either, and it was just like
Mm-hmm.
that was really the moment where it was building up, and we sort of started to sympathize a little bit more. But it was really that moment for me where it was like, okay, now I'm rooting for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of them deserve the shit that they got. Um, I want to see them both have their happy ending because they both really deserve it. So for me, that was probably my favorite moment. But certainly, actually, this similar scene that we just saw where Kanata was impersonating Haruka,
Mm-hmm.
I liked it almost for the exact opposite. That was sort of like just it just gave a demonstration of just sort of how low we could sort of see her go,
Oh yeah.
and just how much to really hurt Haruka. And it was like, this is really hard to watch. This is really hard to stomach because that was a really underhanded thing to do. And then later on, once things start resolving, it was like, okay, I forgive her, but that almost because of the fact that it was a really hard scene to watch. And just a really sort of emotional one to see Haruka just because she's just trying to do the best she can. And the one thing that she did have just got like she just felt was taken away from her. Uh, it definitely made you empathize with her a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just made me want to. I mean, goddamn, I just wanted to give her a damn hug.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much how I think everyone probably ends this route. Like you just wanna just give them both a hug and be like, it's gonna be okay. We we gonna make it. And man, it was just it was such a good ride. Uh, getting going, being able to go through this route because a lot of it, like I'd really forgotten a lot of some of the details and stuff. So it was good, kind of getting a refresher on both of them, and then just getting all the extra exposition and stuff. Just was like so nice. Um,
Definitely.
but so these should be guess these last couple of slides should be finishing out here soon. Um, so obviously Haruka was your favorite route so far. You've obviously like read Coot already and everything, so can't necessarily like ask you, oh, what are your, how excited are you for Coot's route, and
I'm excited to
what are your
talk about Code Drought, that's
and,
for sure.
and what are your impressions going into it? Uh, you've already read it, so you already know that it ain't nothing like you probably thought that route was gonna go.
Oh, I did not expect that. That was a whirlwind. Yeah, that definitely took me by surprise. So
Now, if you
I'm
would have
excited to talk about
if you
that.
would have played the bad end two of this route, you would have gotten a scene with Kanata and Kood, and Kood actually kind of gives some hints towards her route when they're like conversation, because like things aren't necessarily going her way either, and uh, and things are kind of looking grim for her. Um, oh, and just like the CG coming up with both of them
That,
together,
that that
that's
CG was
10 out of 10. It
that
was
was a 10 out of 10 scene.
it was so perfect. It was such a good scene. Like it was so nice, like the symmetry and everything between them. And
And like I said earlier, the song that was played during that is,
oh yeah,
one of my favorites of this of the entire visual novel. And this,
hmm
I mean, the OST to begin with is fantastic, but that
oh yeah.
one definitely just fit the mood so damn well.
So and so I guess like it's kind of going through uh, it's going through them kind of talking to a show about who's daddy and all that stuff. Um, so hopefully I'll get through Coup Drought that next week, and we'll have a good conversation on that, and we'll finally be able to get ready for Refrain and Ren 2, which is
Whew,
gonna be
that's gonna be an adventure to talk about. That
oh yeah, yeah, that's gonna be some fun talk. I'm very much looking forward to that. Hopefully, for the love of God, we'll have some people joining the refrain discussion. I may just have to steal someone from Kazamatsuri and bring them along. But
should have had a cry counter for that one.
yeah, yeah, that was some that's some good stuff. Um, so I guess that's gonna be it. We ain't got anybody to ask questions. So I guess if I mean I guess I'll let you, if you've got anything else you'd like to say about any of the routes, or if there was something that um, you had a question about, or something that you wanted to discuss in particular about Haruka or Kurugaya, we can do that. And then after that I'll wrap it up.
I don't really think I actually have a whole lot. Like I said, there was I definitely do need to replay Kurugai's route just to see how that sort of actually finishes off now that I've played Refrain and there is that extra scene. So I really want to read that before we do hit Refrain, just because I sort of had my own little theory about how that all plays in,
Hmm.
into one another, how all of that comes together. But I don't want to talk about that
Oh
until
yeah.
I at least play that and verify that, and we've had a chance to reveal those spoilers.
Hmm. Oh, all right. Well, I think that'll about do it for this fourth episode of the Little Busters Book Club. Once again, thank you, Nate, for joining me on this fantastic discussion,
Thank you
diving
for hosting me.
into some great routes, some great characters here. Uh, like Haruka is like God, like her route is just so freaking good. Like I don't know, like I've got to play Ren 2 and get through Refrain again, but
I feel like
like right now,
Haruka's route could be,
Haruka is gonna probably like it's definitely in the running for me now that I got
yeah,
a lot
it's
more of it.
Haruka's route almost is worth playing the game alone. Just, I mean, I'll throw that opinion
Oh yeah.
out there. Obviously, Refrain to Rin 2, we'll talk about that.
Hmm.
But yeah, this well worth it. Well worth the time to play that, especially now that I'm like 100 hours into the game.
Oh yeah. Um, so that'll do it. So thanks for joining me. We'll hopefully have another podcast next week if I can stay on schedule. Um, and hopefully we'll get some involvement. Probably won't, but I can wish for the best. Um, so this will do it. So thanks guys.